The global COVID-19 pandemic has had a deep impact on our society and our organizations, changing everything we do. At the start of the pandemic, the UMB CURE Scholars program quickly shifted its work to a virtual and contactless format to maintain a high quality of services to our families. This presentation will provide some examples of how we did it in the hopes that it can be helpful to you and your organization. To talk a little bit about what we do. CURE Scholars is based out of the University of Maryland, Baltimore. We work with over 100 youth a year with the goal of promoting their entry into STEM and healthcare careers. We start working with our scholars at the age of 11 or 12, and we continue to work with them until they are ready to go on to universities or the workforce. So it's a long-term program. We also have a social work program and college and career support programming, making our model holistic. In this photo, you'll see was the last pre-pandemic photo we took as a program at the end of 2019. In a big picture, these are things that I found were essential to our pivot. At the start of the pandemic, I really felt like a crisis manager, as we had to make quick decisions and also weigh the immediate risk of COVID without a vaccine initially. As the pandemic progressed and we started to find a rhythm, our creativity really kicked in, and we started doing some interesting things in our virtual classrooms, which I'll describe in a minute. We were also fortunate to have federal and foundation funders that were flexible with us in changing plans or letting them know what we were and were not able to still deliver. We often pulled together as a team to problem solve and really let go of the way we worked previously. The first area I want to discuss is our social support programs. Many of our families found themselves unemployed or underemployed overnight. The first thing we did was a couple months of needs assessment work. We did this by asking our STEM instructors to take a list of 8 to 12 youth each and make weekly calls home as a way of figuring out who had what needs. We had to provide our families with technology, emergency food, and school supplies. We already had Chromebooks that we used in person, and we received permission from the university to give them to the scholars at home. We always distributed resources either via curbside contactless deliveries or through drive-up events at our university's Community Engagement Center. So here are some photos from our distribution and drive-up events. University policies shifted and changed along the way, which determined how many of us could work together in a space at any given moment. So instead of all hands on deck, it was more like 3 or 4 of us working at a time. Sometimes working indoors, but sometimes the policy would change and we'd have to prepare materials outside. We also had to change the way we administered our STEM education programming. So we use Google Classrooms, which allows you to create virtual classroom folders to store materials. And we also created links for all of our classrooms for the scholars to log into every week. We assembled and distributed STEM kits at various checkpoints along the year, so the scholars had materials at home to do their activities. Their instructors would lead them through activities online 2 days a week. I really think it took a lot of creativity on the part of our program team to create engaging online programming. We were always identifying great speakers to bring into our classrooms, which could come from any state or country, thanks to the virtual format. We also had faculty and K-12 instructors selecting and preparing materials for the home. And in one picture, you'll see some of the materials that were in one of our summer kits from our Institute for Genome Sciences. Again, just like social work resources, all of our STEM materials were given out via contactless delivery in boxes. As time went on, we also recognized that from time to time, scholars needed a bit of movement. And so we started incorporating movement science into some of our lessons, as you'll see here from this image of the dance demonstration activity. Before the pandemic, we would hold 3 to 4 large-scale events a year that would exceed 100 attendees. We committed to holding most of those virtually. In this example, we took our in-person STEM exposition event and had our scholars do voiceover recordings over an image of their science poster and a headshot that we had on file before the pandemic. We used Zoom for all of our events. The one time we tried to use a more conference-style event platform, we had tech issues that we didn't have the capacity or training to work through. So we went back to Zoom after that, and it's worked just fine for us. A final important thing to mention is that we really had to maintain this community of over 100 youth and families and do that in a virtual space. Because our program is multi-year, we can't just hit a reset button on our enrolled population post-pandemic. We tried to offer spaces for dialogue, including around social justice issues that occurred during the pandemic, such as the George Floyd incident and verdict. We also launched a virtual mental health awareness week, which featured virtual wellness classes like yoga for adults, but also presentations on mental health fundamentals for the youth. Finally, we purchased a social and emotional learning curriculum called We Do It for the Culture. Highly recommend it, as we use many of their activities as warm-up activities in our STEM classrooms so they could get to know each other and feel comfortable before they dove right into their science activities. So where are we now? Last month, we actually relaunched back in person. Some of our youth are being bused to campus again for programming, while we do have one grade level that stayed online because they're receiving virtual admissions counselor presentations, which we thought was better to do virtually still. We were able to safely participate in a charity walk the other week. So this group shot here is the first group photo of us since the pandemic started. Finally, we are rebuilding our team in person. The physical office was in suspended animation since March 2020. So we just finished a major office clean out and did simple things like ordering a round of business cards. We did unfortunately have some staff transitions during the pandemic because this work is hard and filled with uncertainty right now. So we have onboarded some new staff under rapidly changing conditions. We have staggered telework schedules, so some of our meetings are still online, and enjoy the days we get to work together in person and see the scholars. We have a lot of work to do to get through the rest of the year and determine what our new normal will be. So I thank you for listening today. Please do keep in touch, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.